I'm so tired of people saying that it's just a movie, it's just a comic book, it's just a TV show. No, it's not. Stories are the building blocks of our culture, of ourselves, even of our own psychology. We are a product of the stories we tell ourselves about our own past and the experiences on a daily basis, but also the stories that we choose to spend time with. What types of values or feelings or whatever are they promoting? What types that we like to spend our time around? They're going to shape us. They're going to shape our personality and character, and they're going to shape our perception of the world and the acts and behaviors that we put out into the world. And people don't understand that. They go, it's just a movie. It's just this. I can like and promote whatever I want. Well, of course you can, but you should pay attention to the responsibility that you have.
Consume stories responsibly.
As a member of society, as a human being, responsibility to yourself.
Consider the consequences.
You need some balance. You need some certain criteria that is going to make sure you're promoting the right kind of works, or at least have thought through the type of work that this or that story is going to do in our culture, and then make your own decision whether or not that's something you want to support.
Consume stories responsibly. Consider the consequences. Consume stories responsibly.
Hello everyone, I'm Professor Geek. Welcome back to the channel. You can hear me okay? So I was pulling some books off the shelf. I got dust all over me. Need to dust those bookshelves. But welcome everyone. Hopefully you've had a good week. Welcome to another Office Hours live stream. Got a few things to talk about tonight, so we will see how it goes. But welcome to everybody who's here. Of course, first off, we have Ghost Planet Max Inc. popping in. Always good to see you there. And as somebody put it, your Wallow text, talking about some interesting points there. Of course, Big Al Presents popped in to say hello. I don't know if you're still here, Big Al, but good to see you there. I think you're probably doing your live stream by now. Coffee, haven't seen you in a while, Coffee. Good to see you. Enzolo, Eldritch Fan. What did yeah, Coffee says, now that the film is out, I see YouTubers talking about Snow White, saying how if you go see it, bring lots of friends with you so you can all go laugh at. They will never learn. Didn't Rachel Zegler say, she specifically said, all of these people, all of my critics on social media, you'll go see it. You will go see it. And she was flat out right. She was flat out right. There was even, I can't remember her name. She's a super popular YouTuber. I think she used to be like of a woke crowd, but then she, became more conservative or whatever. And I don't really watch her channel, but but she has a lot of more political things to say, but every now and then she'll chime in on like pop culture. I can't remember her name. It's kind of hard to pronounce, but she just put out her video that was, I saw Snow White, so you don't have to. Are we seriously still using that ridiculous phrase, so you don't have to? Because I had to go see it. I would have had to go see it, but luckily you, YouTuber, you saw it for me, so now I don't have to. How about we just walk away and not worry about it? Yeah, I'm going to talk about Snow White tonight, but I'm not talking about the crap Disney, Hollywood, current Snow White movie. Everybody's talking about Snow White, trying to get them clicks. I mean, like that person, I saw Snow White so you didn't have to. No, you saw Snow White because you wanted clicks. That's the only reason you went to see it, so you could do your review, and everybody's doing it, and all they're doing is just bringing more attention to the film and bringing more ticket sales to it, certainly. But I figured, you know what? Everybody's been, kind of pearl clutching it. Oh, Rachel Zegler said, what about the original? And I agree with that, but no one's really talking about the original. So I thought, you know what? Darn it. I study fairy tales. I study mythology. Let's talk about what makes the original so great. So we're going to do that a little bit tonight. Not in any extreme depth that it could be done, but we're going to talk about some of it. Eldritch Fan, good to see you. Yeah, and I am actually talking about Revenge of the Sith and novelization tonight. I did finish that, so I'll be talking about that as well. More of Ghost Planet and Eldritch Fan's conversation. Imaginative Hobbyist, welcome. Electric Barbarella, good to see you guys. Private Eye and Retrospectiva. AL, good to see you. Stephen M, Leia Plus Size. Got the usual crew here. A troll, of course, my dear sweet sound engraver. And Big Al was present. He said, I am here. All right. Sorry. Well, I guess that dust got in my throat. Okay. I pulled down my big, huge copy of Grimm's Fairy Tales, and it was a little dusty. Yeah. A little dust in the air here. Super chat right out the gate from my dear sound engraver said, I can't wait until I hear I didn't see it, and you don't have to either. Exactly. You'll never hear that, though. You'll never hear that because this is YouTube, and YouTubers are all about making that money way more than they are by standing by any kind of integrity. Eldritch Fan said, before you get started, gaming question. What's your favorite KOTOR build? like Scout Guardian for Doge, or for Doge. So Doge is so much in the mail in the media today. You said Dodge and Implants and Skills, Guardian Best and Light Side. Yeah, I do Guardian. And that's because, again, I can't really argue with somebody that is the best gameplay. I just always like to play the best story. And in my mind, from what I've known of Revan through the comics and the novels and everything, he's very much a Guardian. I mean, you can make the case that he might be this or that, but yeah, Light Side. I've never played any of the Knights of the Republic games as a dark side playthrough. I wouldn't have fun doing that at all. But yeah, that's my choice, is always Guardian. I've got a saved image too of what the build is, what skills and what, how much strength, wisdom, and all that kind of stuff when you create your character at first. But thank you for the super chat there. Appreciate it. All right, good. Glad everybody's here. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, I was going to say this first before I get into some of the reviews and the talk about things. Let me share the screen. So rarely share the screen that every time I do, I always have to relearn how to do it real quick on air. All right, so my series of short reads on Amazon, Objects of Desire, I just published the third one. So the third one, Unboxing Anna, is just published as of last night. So you can pick up each of these short reads. Only $2.99 a piece. They're on Kindle right now. I just went straight to Kindle, so I don't have to worry about, because you can't these are short reads, so like 10 pages a piece, so I can't publish them as hard copies yet, because that'd be ridiculous, paying for a hard copy of just 10 pages. That's a pamphlet. I don't even think they allow you to publish something like that. But I do have this whole collection written, and so I'm releasing them, like one a month or so. And if I get some good traction on the short reads, then eventually I will release a whole edition, a hard copy edition. But that'll be in the future. So, like I said, you don't need to have a physical Kindle. There's a Kindle app which you can use on a Droid, iPhone, laptop, whatever, to read these. They're very short and very, very, like Edgar Allan Poe's a big inspiration of mine. They're sort of like Twilight Zone-esque tales, but again, they're of the theme of what happens when we love things and use people. So there's lots of relationships, and I mean, I almost said they're moral tales, because there's a moral to be had from each of them, but I don't like saying that word because they're not in any way cutesy little morally. Sometimes there's a lot of sexually explicit content. Again, not for sake of gratuity, but just the to really explore what happens in relationships when people use each other instead of love each other as you're supposed to do, and so forth. But anyway, the third one is out. So there was Girlfriend in the Basement, which is the first one. It's been out the first. No Live Models, which is the second one that I released just a little while ago. And then Unboxing Anna, a haunting short read. Because it is, I try to label these some kind of description of what they are. Girlfriend in the Basement was science fiction. It was very science fiction. So a science fiction short read. No Live Models is a really interesting tale. It could be, depends on how it's left kind of for you to decide on your own, is there a supernatural aspect to it? Is it just a straight read, so I just called that a short read. Unboxing Anna is a very haunting short read, as I labeled it there. So that's available, $2.99, and got this great artist on Fiverr who does these cool images and everything. So yeah, it's a cool story. I think the basic gist of this story is Carl is on his way home to prepare his home for this hot dinner date he's got coming over, and he finds in his mailbox this big package from an ex-girlfriend. And I don't want to say any more than that, but he figures, hey, I can easily hide this package from my hot date coming over tonight. Or can he? But I think it's an interesting story. Everybody who's read it has enjoyed it, so you can check that out. All right. Oh, thank you, Crystal Ashes. I really appreciate that. Said No Live Models, an epic short read. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, if you guys do read it, ratings and or reviews are always appreciated on Amazon, because it's like their currency, for getting it shown more and stuff. It's kind of like on YouTube, Thank you for that. All right, let's maybe I'll talk about Star Wars first, because I don't really have a very lengthy, drawn out review of Revenge of the Sith, the novelization. because you guys know the story. I knew the story of the movie going in, but everybody had told me that, and it's Matthew Stover, the same writer who, had just done Shadows of Mindor that I looked at last week. Everybody was telling me that, I think Matt Wilkins was the first one that I saw, because, he's usually your go-to guy for Star Wars EU stuff. And I saw him talk about, how much more this novel just opens up the story. And he's so right. I didn't know really what he meant by that until I read it. Now, you're not changing the story of Revenge of the Sith at all, but so much is filled in the gap. See, when it comes to the prequels, I am not a prequel hater, okay? I am not one of these people who's just like, the prequels are so dumb and blah, blah, blah. No. I know some people are, and that's fine. I'm not, arguing against those people. I accept the prequels for what they are. They're not horrid pieces of trash. They're not horrid stories. They're a real... they're their own sort of moral lesson about what it means to be a storyteller and not work with the collaborators that you need to work with, right? Because George Lucas is an amazing myth maker. He's an amazing world builder. He really understands mythology. That's why that first Star Wars, that released in 78, later called A New Hope, that's what just made it so magical. Not that it was, the dialogues all over the place. You can go back and pick apart these different things, but he understood myth. He'd studied under Joseph Campbell, and he really was running his script by Joseph Campbell to make sure it really sunk into the hero's journey, hit all the right clicks, and it did. It so did. It was amazing. And then his visuals as a director were amazing. He was really highly influenced by John Ford and a lot of these other, Flash Gordon and all these kind of other things that was going on. So it's, Star Wars is amazing. If he had kept making the trilogy, if he had done Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, again, just by himself, writing and directing, I don't think Star Wars would have made as much of a cultural impact as it did. What was so great about those movies, and everybody, you talk to most people and they usually like Empire Strikes Back as the best of the three. But that's because he had the idea, he had the basic plot, and then he hired co-writers. He hired, I forget the name of this guy, the screenplay. I know his name, but I'm just blanking on it right now. But of course, Kirshner to come in and direct and so forth. So he had people who were really good at writing screenplays, or really good at directing. He had them come in while he just served as a producer and a basic scripter. I mean, he had the basic story there in place. And that's what made them so magical, is that he brought in people to really fill in his own deficits of storytelling. He's not the greatest dialogue writer, so he brought in a script writer who really, freshened that up, and wonderfully so. When it came around to do the prequels, it was all George Lucas, because he was the great freaking George Lucas by that point, and he can do anything he wanted to. And that's why episode 1 and episode 2 got so much flack. It wasn't that they were horrible ideas or horribly, just top to bottom horribly executed. No, I'm not a prequel hater at all. I love them for what they are. I'll even watch Phantom Menace any day. I mean, I enjoy that film. I do. I'm not going to sit there and rip on it. But you allowed all of George Lucas's weaknesses as a storyteller to shine through, because he insisted on having his hands and only his hands on so many different aspects of it. By the time it came around to Revenge of the Sith, I think he was open to actually getting, I think Steven Spielberg had some, input on it and stuff like that, and he got a little bit more input, which is why a lot of people say Revenge of the Sith is the best of their culture. It is. And the great thing about the EU, of course, the EU had been going on long before the prequels came about. George Lucas wouldn't allow them to tell the story of the prequels, because it was something always in his mind. Will he, won't he actually make them or not? That was always something in his mind to do. But the EU did come in and tell some tales around, like, the Clone Wars. And they told a lot of tales that kind of touched on the prequels a bit. So enough so that by the time George Lucas actually made the prequels, the EU had to kind of adjust and shift and, readjust to fit that in and adjust to that continuity. And that's what I love about the EU, is that it was such a living, malleable thing. You had, especially Kevin J. Anderson, writers like him who really did pay attention to the whole world building universe. And you had excellent novels that were written in the EU, standalone novels, but then there were people that came along and tried to really make sure the continuity fit. And it was just a bunch of fans. It wasn't like a big corporate. There wasn't a board, or whatever. It was just the, EU authors will talk to, especially in the early days, like they would just get together at the cons and say, okay, what are you doing in your novel? All right, now mine's set after yours, so I'll make sure that I don't mess that up here and this and that, and they were just Star Wars fans. Whether the books are good or bad, they vary in levels of quality as any series does. But they were just true blue fans of the content, and they loved the original trilogy and tried to remain true to the spirit of it. And I think that shines through in the EU big time, more so than any other shared universe out there in any media, I believe. Now, I haven't read all of them. I know some people are like, Die Hard, Warhammer 4K, this and that, and that's fine. But so I knew that Revenge of the Sith was the basic story of Anakin's fall. I'd seen the movie, and I was like, okay, what is the EU going to do? Matt Stover, of course, he'd already won me over as a great author. What is he going to do to really fill in this story and make it breathe and make it even more, it's not direct dialogue from the scenes in the movie. The dialogue does change, but the basic story's there. It's Matt Stover, obviously, the same one who wrote Shatterpoint, so you get a lot of references to some of his other books. Mace Windu, for example, at the beginning of Shatterpoint, he really kind of looks up to Chancellor Palpatine. Or respects him, thinks that he's a decent man to be leading the Republic, and by this time, obviously by Revenge of the Sith, he has no time for Palpatine. He does say that there's a great line in it in which he says, Mace Windu did not fight for the Republic; he fought for civilization, because peace comes from civilization. Everything good, culture, harmony, arts, the commerce, everything good about a thriving, peaceful people comes from a civilization. And that makes perfect sense for his character coming from the Corran, jungle and so forth. So, that little things like that just really made individual characters breathe a lot more. So the screen glitched there. Even Anakin, Eldritch fan for $1.99, you say compare Anakin's fall to Luke's triumph. You're absolutely right. Revenge of the Sith to Return of the Jedi. You compare both of those movies, and it's a really great compare and contrast, and it shows what George Lucas had in mind the whole time. But Anakin in the movie Revenge of the Sith, it was like so much had to happen so quickly. And it's fine because it's mythology. But when you're watching the movie, it's easy to think, is it really believable? The whole, oh, suddenly he just falls and suddenly now he's a Darksider, and so forth. I mean, you get it, you buy it because you know the myth and you know the story of it. But the novel really fleshes that out even more in a lot of little ways. I'm just going to give you one example. When Palpatine requests him to be his representative on the Jedi Council, in the famous scene in the movie when the Jedi Council brings him in and says, you will be a member of this council, but you are not a master ranked to be a Jedi master. And of course that was an insult to him because nowhere, that's not like unprecedented. Anyone on the council is a Jedi master, and that was just a slap in the face to him, all those things in the movie. In the book, you get his interiority though, and he thinks, okay, when he first hears that they're going to let him into the council, he's thinking, oh, they're going to promote me to Jedi master. And he thinks about a little bit about the recognition, he'd be the youngest Jedi master ever and whatnot. But then it says he doesn't really care about recognition, though. That's not really what he's after. What he's really after is the title of Jedi Master so that he can access the secret master levels of the Jedi library. So then he can go in and try and find the information that could maybe help him save Padme, because he's had the visions of her dying in childbirth. That's what he was so upset about not being bestowed the rank of master on. And that makes so much more sense than just a bratty little, I want to be a master, I mean, there's something to that and you can get it, but this just fleshes out the character so much more, makes so much more sense. There's a lot of little places like that really flesh out the story, especially when it's, you get progress into Palpatine kind of trying to seduce him to the dark side even more and talking about Plagueis and so forth. It just makes so much more sense. It's so much more of a satisfying story, and it's a novel, so you can obviously tell and give a lot more characterization and interiority and so forth in a novel than you can in a film. I'm not saying the film should have been this and that. Again, I'm not a prequel hater at all. I like them for what they are, but it was like, wow, man, because I'd read the Phantom Menace novelization. I hadn't read the Clone War or Attack of the Clones novelization, but some of the novelizations, like the Phantom Menace novelization, is pretty much just beat for beat, what the movie is, just as a lot of novelizations are. It's all they're supposed to be, on the surface level. It's just a novel version of the film. But this one went above and beyond. So if you're somebody who doesn't usually enjoy novelizations, and you're a Star Wars fan, you definitely want to pick up Revenge of the Sith, though. Eldridge Fan was talking about how, it does kind of build on Shatterpoint thematically, and then you can do this, and then you move into Shadows of Endor that I talked about last week. And it's so true. These are the themes that are right there, and they build on each other. And those are so vastly different eras of the Star Wars universe, because you've got Shatterpoint, which is the Clone Wars, prequel, Old Republic, not Old Republic, but Republic era. And then Revenge of the Sith, the fall of the Republic, the beginning of the Empire, and then Shadows of Endor, well after Truce at Bakura and Courtship of Leia and all of that. So it's and it shows how the universe is really just about that, resisting the darkness versus the light, and Anakin / Luke being the chosen ones to find balance in it ultimately. So it's really great. I do recommend Revenge of the Sith novelization. Eldridge Fan says Palpatine came across as a demonic being in the book. Yeah, you really get more of his evil in the book. You absolutely do. Because you wonder at that. I'm just reading Rise of the Dark Lord, The Rise of Darth Vader now. Just started it. I'm not really into it enough to talk about it, but that kind of picks up right after Revenge of the Sith in a lot of ways, and talking about what is the relationship like between Vader and Palpatine after he's revealed as the Sith Lord, and after, what is Darth Vader like, living in that mechanized suit, being so sort of half a man, and so forth and so on. So it's really great. Revenge of the Sith gets you a lot there, and I appreciated that. Crystal Ashes, thank you so much for bestowing 5 memberships. I need to do more for members. One thing I do, though, is when I cut out our set movies, our videos to be published that week, I'll make them available to members first, and then they'll go available to everybody else at their given time. So appreciate that. I said, don't mind me, I just want more green in the chat. Well, very much appreciated. Thank you. Eldridge Fan, there's Mendor was thematic sequel to Revenge of the Sith. Yeah, I can absolutely see that. If you look at Revenge of the Sith, building on some of the things in Shatterpoint, and Mendor is a thematic sequel to that. Absolutely. So yeah, really enjoyable. At this point, I'm actually listening to Dark Lord, The Rise of Darth Vader. I just started listening to the Audible version of that because they just released a unabridged Audible version. I have the book, and I've looked through the book first. I don't think I've ever finished the book. What I'm reading, though, right now, in terms of just sitting down with a book and reading it, is the first of the Jedi Academy trilogy, Jedi Search. And I'm about 60 pages away from finishing the first novel. I've got a nice science fiction book club edition that has all 3 novels of the trilogy and just a nice hardcover. So that's pretty good. This print's a little small, which is starting to be an issue for my old man, 45-year-old eyes. But I'm about 60 pages away from finishing it. A lot of people were telling me that Jedi Academy trilogy, that's trash, that's garbage, blah, blah, blah. I don't get that, at least not so far. Now, again, I'm only in the first book. I'm still about 60 pages away from finishing the first book. Thus far, I can say about the Jedi trilogy is it's Kevin J. Anderson. It's not incredibly well written. It's not well written, I wouldn't say, but that doesn't mean it's not enjoyable. Kevin J. Anderson strikes me as somebody, he wrote this right at the time of the burgeoning of the EU, and he talks about him kind of being the go-between between Tom Veitch and Timothy Zahn, between the Thrawn trilogy and Dark Empire and so forth, and he really, more than any other novel that I've read from this era, really tries to reference what came before, Truce at Bakura, all of these things. And this novel takes place, of course, after all of that, after Dark Empire, after all of that, and it's Luke trying to establish the Jedi Academy for the New Republic, the New Order of Jedi. It does feel a little bit more like a Star Wars fan writing the novel than a novelist who sat down with a clear outline, and is going through that. But as a Star Wars EU fan, I don't really mind that at all. There's chapters where it just kind of meanders and it's just kind of glorying and being in the Star Wars universe. Not a whole lot's happening to further the plot, but I just enjoy it. I enjoy being there. I'm there for it, you know? So I do get, it's not a well-written, at least, and again, I'm only on the first novel. I'm still about 60 pages from finishing it, but it's not a well-written, you know, book, but it's terribly fun. I'm enjoying it so far. I've met, Admiral Dala, and, you know, so we're going. Poor Han Solo. And it's like, geez, Kevin J. Anderson, what do you have against poor Han Solo? He's just suffering just about everything he possibly could. Every horror that could be thrown at him thus far, but he prevails because he's Han Solo. And so yeah, that's just my thoughts initially as I'm going through that. I don't know if I'll give a proper review of just Jedi Search or if I should wait until I read the entire trilogy, but I'm plowing through it. Like I said, I'm reading this hard copy, and then I'm listening right now to I'm listening to Dark Lord Rise of Darth Vader because I want to have at least a general idea of the whole plot before Al and I do the book study. And when we do the book study, I'll be reading, you know, page after page of it in a hardcover, so a hard copy. So yeah, that's where I am all things Star Wars right now. My dear Sound Engraver for a super chat, thank you so much. You said the dialogue in the book talking about the Revenge of the Sith is fresh and doesn't follow the film. You're right, it doesn't. Even if there are lines shared, it's executed differently, so it's a new experience. Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's the you know, he'll take the script, and he's not just, you know, like I said, he comes into a scene, he doesn't use the exact dialogue from the scene. He might use some lines, but he freshens it up a lot of in a great way, because, you know, dialogue isn't George Lucas's strength, which is why he works best having a script writer to take his story and adapt it as a script. But you know, it is what it is. Like I said, you won't hear prequel hatred coming from me. You'll hear a lot of sequel trilogy hatred because that's not the sequel. but anyway. All right, let me check in with the chat here for a second or two before I move on. It's the green you need. And when I look into your future, it's the green that I see. Such a great song. Such a freaking great song from a Disney show. Absolutely. That's one of the songs on my Halloween playlist too. So good. Oh, it's just so good. That was, I think, the last the last great animated Disney movie. I mean, I don't hate Rapunzel. I don't hate Tangled. It was the first of the whole, you know, computer animated, and it's not bad. It's not bad at all. I like a lot about Tangled. But they just doubled down on that and fell so far from grace so quickly after that. And Princess and the Frog was the first 2D, or the last 2D Disney animated princess film, definitely. And so good, so good. Anyway, that's right. Sequels, you mean the Heir to the Empire? They're great. Exactly. They are great. That's the real sequels. Eldridge Fan says, I appreciate the continuity, but Kevin J. Anderson treated the books like a Saturday morning cartoon. Star Wars isn't just for kids, it's for families. Again, I'm only about 60 pages done for the first book. So I could, you know, after reading 2 more books, I can definitely see the criticisms. I'm not going to be the one to stand up and say, no, this is incredibly well done. It's well executed. No, I get those criticisms. Maybe it's done a little too kiddie-like. Totally get that. But as a Star Wars EU fan, I don't really care. I'm enjoying it. You know, now if this was the way that every EU book I read was, then I wouldn't be okay with that. And I can cut Kevin J. Anderson some slack because I've read enough of his stuff to know he actually is capable of incredibly good writing. His Old Republic comics, his Batman, Superman, you know, novels and stuff like that. So I know he's a good writer. I know he can do it. I'm guessing that just the Star Wars fanboy was peeking out a little too much when he wrote these books. That's my theory anyway. There's another comment before I get to the super chat. Imaginative Hobbyist said, one very interesting way Star Wars and Snow White relate is Disney once considered making a samurai-inspired Snow White with Natalie Portman and Jet Li. I had no idea. When was this? When did they try to do this? That sounds like something that they could have been doing with their agenda-driven stuff over the last decade, or maybe like around the early Mulan era, you know? I don't know. But that is interesting. I hadn't heard that. All right. Eldridge Fan for another super chat said, Kevin J. Anderson's trilogy had a good idea, but I didn't think it came together well at the end of book 3. Okay, well, don't tell me even more of that, because I haven't gotten there yet. So we'll see. but I'll get there eventually. I don't know if I'll finish the whole trilogy by next week to be able to talk about it. I'd like to. This was my spring break this past week, and I thought I was going to have all this extra time, and I so didn't. I so didn't. Everything just kept popping up, one thing after the other. So, but I don't have a lot of teaching to do this week because some students are doing some workshops in my classes and turning in papers and whatnot, which means grading for me. So we will see. Hey, Smoic, good to see you. Late to the party as you are. All right. So let me talk a little bit about Snow White now, and just say everything I've got to say about that. And then if you guys have questions or whatever, we can hang out for as long as my social energy holds. But as I said at the beginning of the stream, you're not going to hear me sit here and talk about the Rachel Zegler Snow White. I think the best thing we can do about that is just flat out ignore it. But these channels won't. They will continue to try and make every little red cent they can out of pretending to oppose it, which is just helping it, So, but as I said, even from the beginning of Rachel Zegler's first comments way back when, everybody was saying, how dare her demean the original? And I get that, rightly so, but I hardly find any channels out there at all talking about what made the original so great. What is so special about Snow White, the original fairy tale and the Disney classic? So I wanted to say a little bit about that. Again, you could teach a whole class on this, so I'm not going to cover everything by any means. But before I get into the more of a deeper analysis of the story, it is a fairy tale. And fairy tales are folk tales. Fairy tales are folk tales for children. That's the best way to describe a fairy tale. It's a folk tale for children. And you can go a little bit deeper with your definition of the genre. It's mostly, from old Europe, and why it's got a lot of the European, mythos in it with fairies and creatures of the forest and so forth and so on. But there's folk stories in that they were told and retold and told in so many different versions. That's why if you ever hear somebody say, Disney they just bastardized the Grimm fairy tales. They changed it so much and they took out, just go ahead and slap that person in the face because they're an idiot. And they're an idiot and they deserve whatever kind of jolt of logic might come through your slap in the face. Not really. I'm not actually telling you to go be violent, but that's just the most, pardon my French, but that's just the most dumbass thing you could possibly say. Disney just ruined the Grimm fairy tale. If you know even 2% about what fairy tales are, they're folk tales. The nature of a folk tale is to be told and retold and shaped, and like mythology, shaped by audience feedback, and not shaped, in a way someone might say that the current, Disney live action crap is, well, what's wrong with that? That's another version. No, that's an agenda driven version. That's not being, that's not listening to feedback from the audience at all. But the Grimm brothers themselves, they went out and found all of these stories. There were many varied versions of these stories when they compiled them into their fairy tales. And the Grimm brothers were staunch Protestants of the time. The Huguenots? Forget exactly. But they were staunch, like Germanish, Protestant of that lineage. So they would cut out a lot of the sex, a lot of the more sensual scenes in the tales, but they'd ramp up the violence, weirdly so, in others. and they even, fairy tales, Grimm brothers even put out different versions within their lifetime. At least one of the brothers did, if I remember correctly. So to take a Grimm fairy tale and adjust it and alter it, for a 1930s American popular fiction audience or whatever, there's nothing wrong with that at all. You might not like it, and that's fine. You might not like some of the changes they made. But to say that's not doing them justice, blah, 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 that's just ridiculous. So get over that. Before we even talk about, some of the, well, maybe this will kind of segue into talking about the appeal of the original story. But you can just, fairy tales, children latch onto fairy tales so much because they deal with struggles that a child recognizes growing up, developing psychologically. They deal with a lot of those struggles in ways that resonate, and the resonance doesn't always make the clearest, most straightforward story. So it's always funny when you get somebody trying to be all clever and like they're all smart, like, why didn't Hansel and Gretel just do this? That's so dumb, blah, blah, blah. Because it's a fairy tale. It's not supposed to be a logical, linear, like, novel, because they have these these struggles. So, for example, Snow White, it starts out with the evil queen, whether she's the mother in this version or the stepmother in this version or whatever, jealous of her daughter's beauty. And this is a fairy tale, so it's a very extreme example. And yes, sadly, there probably are, cases in the real world of mothers or stepmothers being that extremely jealous and being that horrible here and there, trying to thwart their child's development this way or that way because they're jealous of them. But that is a thing. That is a real psychological element that a lot of unhealthy parents have, and to one degree, it's somewhat, you can imagine it's somewhat natural. Let's say a parent has always had these dreams about their life. Let's say a guy, it's the stage mom syndrome in a lot of ways, right? The mother always wanted to be a star on stage and get the right singing roles, but she never quite achieved what she wanted to be. So her daughter's going to do it, and she wants to live vicariously through her daughter. But then let's say her daughter actually really does start achieving it. And what does the mother want to do? The mother wants to get in there and control everything because she's jealous on some level, So it's based in a lot of real human psychology. And children, you can imagine a child. I mean, I'm no psychologist, no expert on this, but anybody could imagine a child with a parent that has that kind of jealousy, and the child doesn't understand all the ins and outs of it, but you got a parent who's so psychologically immature or emotionally immature, the child's going to feel those tensions and see it reflected in stories. So it's, things like that. The father in Snow White, in a lot of the tales, the father's not absent. Some of the tellings of Snow White in the past, the father was there, but certainly, especially by the time we get to Disney's film, the father's just not there. He's died, he's whatever, you don't know what's happened to them. But you do have the huntsman, and the huntsman's very much a stand-in father figure, because the huntsman is commanded by the queen to go out and kill Snow White and bring back her heart and liver or whatever, but he doesn't, so he's kind of like the weaker father figure on the one hand. Oh, yes, dear, whatever you want. Scared to stand up to the toxic, powerful, dangerous wife, but at the same time loving his daughter, so to speak, so much that he can't quite enact that evil upon her. Even though in the story, I know the huntsman isn't her father, isn't the queen's husband or anything like that, but it's kind of a stand-in, when you read enough fairy tales and you see these types, the huntsman's kind of there. The huntsman is also supposed to be a protector because, when you watch Disney fairy tales, you're used to animals being the cute and fuzzy creatures that are the princess's friends and so forth. And that's a really cool development. It really has a lot to do with the innocence of the young maid, being able to be at peace with nature around her and so forth because of her innocence and whatnot and purity. But in a lot of the fairy tales as they were written, creatures of the forest are dangerous. And psychologically, there's a lot of great books about the psychology. I think the kind of go-to sort of Bible, so to speak, about psychology and fairy tales is still Bruno Bettelheim's Uses of Enchantment. A lot of great things in there, no matter how much modern academia wants to try and pish-posh it. It's still a lot of good things in there. But hunters were ones who conquered the beasts of the forest. And the beasts of the forest are things a child would be afraid of the wolves out there, afraid of the critters and whatnot that could come and kill them. And then you can see this like psychological symbolism of these creatures being the forces of the child's id growing up, and his dark desires or whatever, and the hunter is somebody who goes out and subdues those creatures. So the hunter is seen often as a protector, like in Little Red Riding Hood, or a lot of other stories. So a fatherly figure in that sense. But then you've got, again, in the Snow White, the hunter who is unable to ultimately protect her. The best he can do is just abandon her, say, run away, go out in the woods by yourself. That's the best he can do. Then she meets the 7 dwarves, who are stunted individuals, right? Being the fantastical beings of dwarves, they're of short stature, and they burrow into the ground. They're I love that the Disney movie, has them not be very good housekeepers, and then Snow White's the one who brings that domesticity to their life. I like that. In the original fairy tale, it was more that they were the ones who were told her, okay, you can stay here and have room and board, but you need to work. You need to, keep house for us and stuff like that, which is its own sort of level of instruction on growing her up and maturing her and so forth. You're going to get out from under your parents' protection or danger. Then you need to work. So, but you look at the seven dwarves as these sort of visually stunted individuals, and symbolically that can mean stunted in their growth, in manhood and so forth, burrowing into the ground. There's all kind of phallic symmetry there, but for jewels and whatnot, unable to really take care of themselves quite well. And you got the feminine entering in the picture. It's beautiful, So maybe we can kind of segue and talk a little bit about the Disney version. We can say a lot about just the technical. Love that cover. I don't know if the light's showing it too well. There we go. My Blu-ray version there, but this was one of the anniversaries. I've bought this movie 2 or 3 times throughout my life, but Alyssa, when she was younger, loves her Disney princesses and kept finding the DVDs. And Alyssa, she'll carry a DVD around as though that's carrying around the characters in that movie. She'll have some stuffed animals. She loves her Goofy stuffed animal, but even now, she'll carry DVDs around because that's her way of carrying those characters with her, like her friends in the movie or so forth. So she put a lot of my old DVDs and Blu-rays through a lot of wear and tear. So I've had to get new ones now that she's out of that phase a little bit, and at least the phase of understanding that that's Daddy's shelf. We don't touch those DVDs. But the Disney movie did so many wonderful changes. I love the changes the Disney movie brought to it. Her being that feminine, maternal, domestic presence to come into the dwarves' lives, kind of helps them, grow up to some degree as well, because in the end, they tried to protect her more. And what is the masculine supposed to do? The masculine is supposed to protect the feminine. That's the masculine genius, serving and protecting the feminine, just as the feminine genius is to cultivate and compassion and give the care, back. So, picture, and of course, they're not the ones that care for her ultimately. She needs the prince. She needs the one that's suited for her, and that sort of psychologically, you'd say the Oedipal situation, which everybody kind of giggles when you talk about the Oedipus complex, but it's not what people think it is. You'll find some, especially older psychoanalysts, trying to push the most extreme version of it. But the basic idea is that any girl or boy growing up with the ultimate end goal of emotionally developing to where they can go out in the world and find their own mate, they're going to look to their father or mother as the first examples of that opposite sex in their lives, right? Not that they love or want to have sex with their mother or father or anything like that. Okay. But there's a, it's sometimes just called, and, psychologically speaking, especially in the old psychoanalytic, terms, it's called that Oedipal syndrome when it goes in an unhealthy way, when you're too attached one way or the other. Again, not necessarily that you want to bust out full Oedipus, right? But you've got that aspect there. So her finding, protection, as imperfect as it is, from the huntsman, and then ultimately the dwarves, and then ultimately her prince. It's kind of a full development with that. She's also just a perfect example in the Disney film of 100% pure, innocent purity, and the pure feminine. Everything lovely and true and pure about the feminine genius. It's her character. It's wonderful. But she is tempted by her own little bit of vanity and eating the apple. So you do have her own little character arc there. She's not just a bland character who does nothing. She does have to overcome her own little bit. When she succumbs to that apple, from the witches, and in the stories, the witch, even the evil queen, comes to her in a few different guises, trying to break in or whatever. And she does take the apple, which of course has all these Edenic, the apple in the Garden of Eden, apple, even though it wasn't necessarily an apple, but in mythology, that's the way it's been written down. And, so we've got all those elements. It's vanity, right? If the wicked queen wants to be the fairest of them all, you see Snow White, look at that apple and how good it would be. It's the lust of the flesh, right? For the sensuous, sensation of eating that beautiful, lovely, tasty apple and so forth. So she has her own little arc. It's a great film. Let me catch a couple of super chats here before I just get too far ahead, and then I'll come back to saying some things. Tom Spiegel for $9. Thank you so much. Said, lucky you were streaming when I got back from Black Bag. Oh, I thought you said Black Flag for a second. I was like, Black Flag? They're doing a concert again? I just got a membership to your channel from Crystal Ashes. Nice. And Black Bag was good. What is Black Bag? Is that a film? I don't follow the new stuff that comes out, so I don't know. You guys will have to tell me, but no idea what Black Bag is. But thank you for receiving a channel membership from Crystal Ashes there. Dr. Y, good to see you there for $5. Said, you talking about detractors of Disney's versions reminds me of what Tolkien and Lewis thought of the film. Glad you brought that up. As much as I dearly love J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, I mean, they're my heroes in a lot of ways for a lot of the great things they did. They just devolved into curmudgeonly old farts when it came to Snow White. Those aren't dwarves. They can't do dwarves like that. They just like, they were the perfect example of how even the smartest and the wisest and the most talented people can just devolve into the grumpy old Muppets. I mean, that's really what they were. I mean, you know, Lewis and Tolkien just became the grumpy old Muppets when Snow White came out. And I can only, I can't imagine that there wasn't a little bit of jealousy in there, that Disney was the new thing. I mean, when this movie hit, everybody laughed. They laughed that Disney was doing a feature-length animated film that had never been done. Animation was for kids. That was it was a cutesy little trick of the filmmaking process that you could do, whatever, but that was just whatever. Play that before a proper movie. No, everybody thought this movie was going to be garbage, and even the most ardent critics went to go see Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and were blown away by the sheer beauty of it. I was watching a little bit of it before this stream just to make sure that I had, you know, some of the parts of the intro right. And Sound Engraver came over and entered the room while I was watching it. We were both just sitting there staring at it. It's so gorgeous. I will watch this any day over any recent animated Disney film. It's magical. It really is. It's the heart of what Disney truly was, and it's an example of everything they've completely and utterly lost and fallen from. Even with the older, you know, look of it or whatever. Please go back to using those older techniques. They were brilliant, you know. So the movie was so popular that I'm sure Tolkien and Lewis were a little miffed about that. Maybe I don't know. But again, love Tolkien and Lewis. You'll never hear me say a bad thing about them. But yeah, they were straight up. Grumpy old. Saw the channel glitch there. They were straight up grumpy old farts talking when it comes to their thoughts on Snow White. Tolkien was not a fan of Dune. Yeah, I mean, I love Tolkien. Love Tolkien. I will always appreciate and study his work. But he had some... I mean, he was one of those people, how dare you not say the Mass in Latin? That kills the whole thing. You know, you got some of these people around there now today. It's like, look, if you like the Latin Mass, good for you. Great. Please continue to go to it. I'm glad it blesses you. But shut up. It's not what everybody needs to go experience because it's my favorite, you know, and so forth. Tom Spiegel says, Black Bag is a spy film with very little marketing, written by David... see, that's another reason why I hadn't heard of it. I don't follow new stuff in any way, and if it hasn't been marketed very well, interesting. I might have to check that out. Yeah, Black Flag. When you say I saw that as Black Flag, I was like, are they touring? What? Are they even all alive? I don't even know what the what their current setup is. But thank you guys for clarifying there. Yeah, before I do forget, I've still got a few more things to say, but before I do forget, Sound Engraver is streaming tomorrow, as she says there. Thoughts on Mirror Mirror. You know, I think what you're talking about is the whole Mandela effect. Yeah, I always heard mirror, mirror on the wall. And of course, if you go back and watch the movie, it's magic mirror on the wall. So it's one of the things that people are citing as the Mandela effect, right? Like no cornucopia and the Fruit of a Loom logo, or, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And, you know, it's easy to laugh that off. It's easy to roll your eyes at anybody taking that seriously. But you sit down and look at like all of the many things that are listed, it's kind of hard to shake off completely. You're like, something's going on. Something's weird. I'm not prepared to say what it is, but something's weird, you know. Dr. Weiss says, after watching the Hobbit trilogy, I could only imagine what Snow White would be like with those dwarves. Yeah. I mean, dwarves are an incredibly important aspect of fantasy fiction. Fairy tales or fantasy fiction or whatever. And what's his name? I'm blanking on his name right now, but the guy from Game of Thrones, you know, who came out and just pitched his little hissy fit about, you know, actual dwarves aren't getting roles and and plenty of, and that killed him. Dinklage, his name, Peter Dinklage. A lot of actors who are dwarves are like, whoa, no, shut up. We want the roles. These are great roles that we've had, and just because he got so big for his britches, where he was popular and could play anything or whatever, he just ruined it for a lot of people. And no, the characters of dwarves, I mean, I don't think, does anybody conflate the two? Like a person with actual medical dwarfism, I think it's still called dwarfism, an actual little person, as sometimes they've been called, a person with that actual medical condition. Who conflates that person with an actual, mythical dwarf? Dwarfs are a specific type of mythical creature, and they're the be all and end all of their definition isn't their short stature. For example, in some stories, they're quite taller than somebody with actual dwarfism in the real world and whatnot. I would think that it was if dwarves didn't exist in fairy tales and in mythology, I could see the left crying out for those kinds of characters for representation purposes, because it's a great representation of people of all different statures, and good, evil, whatever, they're important types of characters. So yeah, I love those characters. Yeah, I've never seen Snow White and the Huntsman. Well, of course, why would I? Kristen Stewart, I just don't really care for her. You don't have to imagine, just watch Snow White and the Huntsman. Actually, don't watch it. It's not very good. Yeah, I won't. That was the first movie, everybody's talking about how can Gal Gadot be deemed as less fair than Rachel Zegler. You were hearing this with the whole Snow White and the Huntsman, because it was Charlize Theron, right, who played the Wicked Queen. And you're going to tell me that Kristen Stewart is fairer than Charlize Theron? Absolutely not. Not even remotely. So, yeah. Leia plus size. Oh, you're talking to Dr. Y. You say the prince, that Prince Dwarf would be the grumpy to Snow White, but would be the Fitz to go after the witch. Yeah, I love the dwarves, and so many people didn't like them. Brutal Bettelheim didn't like the idea of naming the dwarves and giving them individual personalities. Of course, Tolkien and Lewis had all kind of problems with it. I thought the dwarves being given their personalities and made into individual characters was brilliant, because it furthered the lesson of what it can mean to be defined by a certain trait. Now, they're lovable characters. They're good characters. You like them. But dopey, sneezy, bashful. You think about children, children who suffer from too much shyness. If they're not careful, that can become their identity. Oh, that's bashful over there, and that shouldn't be the case. They should be so much more than that. Oh, that's happy. They're always happy. Well, are they stunting their other emotions and so forth, and so yeah, that's going really deep into the psychology of it. Of course, children aren't watching or reading things in this level, but the idea is that it resonates somewhere interior with them to that respect. I also want to just say too, a big thumbs up to the Kingdom Hearts franchise's treatment of Snow White, the fairy tale. You really get it in oh crap, I'm just blanking on so many things. What's the Kingdom Hearts game with the prequel to it, Kingdom Hearts, shoot. Birth by Sleep. That's the one. That's the one where you play the different characters and they're going through the different fairy tale lands and whatnot. But Snow White, you get to go into the dwarves' mines. You get to go into the Wicked Queen's castle. You get to go into the dwarves' hut and all of that. And you save Snow White, in the wilderness. They did a good example of that too. A good treatment of it. Yeah, Birth by Sleep was the one I was looking for. It's so I never brain fart like this in real life, but when you're on, if I'm teaching a live lecture, to students or whatever, you reach for that word and it's so not there because so much of your brain is also engaged on saying this other thing and whatnot. So, and plus I do these kind of late, as I've said, Saturday evenings. I am fried anyway. I'm about to sign off here and go not talk to anybody except for my dear sound engraver. Of course. The sound engraver is the only human being that doesn't exhaust my introversion. Now, I need to be alone to build up the energy, right? So if I'm just utterly fried and I don't get time alone. Even with Sound Engraver, I can't build up that energy. But Sound Engraver doesn't wear me out like other people do, because she's my co-introvert, even though she's not as introverted as I am. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. How many more times before they gotten it wrong? Private Eye says, in the words of J.J. Jameson, if she doesn't want to be famous, might as well make her infamous. You are an introvert. Sound Engraver is an absolute introvert. I just have never met an individual who's as introverted as I am. Sound Engraver can function and survive in the world a lot better than I can when it comes to talking to people and whatnot. I always get a little nervous. Now, I love my parish. I love my parish. I love my priest. I love the people that go to the parish. There are some individuals that, Sound Engraver and I have had dinner with and whatnot and enjoy talking to. They're all wonderful people. Nevertheless, on the way out of Mass, I always get this little bit of like, because it's wondering, am I going to get caught in a conversation that's going to get hard to get out of? Because, I'm fried at that point and I need to go home. And, yeah, I mean, I love talking to the people. Don't get me wrong. They're wonderful. Love my priest, love talking to them, but I'm always a little uneasy walking through the foyer there on the way out. So, all right. Let's see. Oh yeah, Senator says she's talk to an average of 40 people a week and need that time. Yeah, she does. That's the thing. Sound Engraver, we're both teachers, right? But I teach classes, college classes, and she teaches individuals in music lessons. And that's so much more draining when you're one-on-one. I know that because sometimes during the semester I'll do one-on-one conferences with my students about their papers. They'll turn in a paper and I'll give them feedback on how to revise it, and then I'll meet with them one-on-one to explain it and whatnot. And that's so much more draining. I always hated, some of my fellow professors were like, oh, it's conference day. This is great. I don't have to teach. I just sit back in my office talking to some students. I'm like, no. Let me give 5 extra lectures that day rather than sit there and talk to 40 kids in a row or something, pass. Yeah, Dr. White, that's why I so identified with the Hobbits. I remember the very first time I ever read The Hobbit, or even just watched The Rankin and the Bass Hobbit as a child. I'm like, screw you dwarves, leave him alone. Stupid Gandalf, all he wants to do is just hang out by himself. Leave him alone. Because I just have that mindset right away. All right. Well, guys, speaking of, we are at the hour mark, and pretty much said everything I had prepared to say. I think I got it all out. I'll cut some videos out, and I'll continue my journey through the Jedi Academy trilogy and my journey through Dark Lord, Rise of Darth Vader. I'm working on my EU book collection. It's coming together really, really well. Just, every time I get a little extra money, I'll look for this book and try and grab that. I'll have to do another, I'm reorganizing my shelves right now because I need more shelf space for my EU collection. So I'm reorganizing it. After I do that and finish it, I think I'll do a little video, tour of my EU bookshelves, just to kind of show off the collection thus far and show what I'm still looking for and what I'm still trying to get. But, it'll be a lifelong, because my goal is to get as many. I won't put a Legends book on the bookshelf at all. If it has the Legends banner, Disney Legends banner, no, except unless there are some like, was it one of the Darth Maul books, I think, for example? There was a extra short story that was released as an e-read, but it wasn't released in hard copy until the Legends version came out and soft. So for an example like that, I've got the nice hardcover original EU, and then I've got the little Legends paperback because it has that extra piece of story in it or whatever. But so that, and then I try and get as many hardcovers versus paperbacks as I can. Some books, of course, weren't published in hardcover, and it can be hard to find library binding every now and then, but I've got some really good finds. I've got some really great library bound books that people didn't know were actually hardcover, and stuff. So we'll do a tour of my EU bookshelf at some point. All right. Yeah, I mean, if you have, there's no shame in getting the mass market paperbacks at all. I mean, hey, get what you can to read them. And if all you can get are the Legends books, hey, go for it. I'm just saying, for my collection, I'm trying to sort of, what's the word? Curate it as something that could, be a collection, because those books are going to be very hard to find one day. Especially like the young reads, for like the prequel era, whatever. I've got the complete set of the Jedi Apprentice books, or the Jedi Order books, or whatever. A complete set of those, and they're really hard to find because they were just these little paperback young reads, but they tell more of the story of Anakin and so forth. So things like that. But yep, we'll do that later. That's all for now, though. I'm pretty fried. I'm gonna go relax. But been good hanging out with you guys. Yeah, you guys have a great weekend too, AL. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your night and the rest of your day. And until next time, keep enjoying and digging deeper into the true blue hero stories you love. Thanks for watching.